Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Democrats.
Good evening, Democrats.
Wow. Perfect on the first time. We don't even have to do it again. Great job, everybody. And we're here for our second meeting of the September endorsement season for 2022. Last week, if you joined us, we had our first set of endorsements. That was for rent control board, college board, and school board. Sorry, I said endorsements. What I meant to say was debates, forums. We had the candidates come through. We have not made any endorsements yet. That's coming in 2 weeks. So right now, we're just going to be having a debate with all the candidates for city council. And a little bit later this evening, we're going to be having discussions about the Santa Monica ballot measures that we'll all have the chance to vote on this November. So before we start, I just wanted to clarify one point. There's some rumors going around about our process, and I wanted to make sure everybody knew that we take great pride in the fact that this has been the most open and transparent process that we've had as far as how we interview and reach out to these candidates. So 1 week before the deadline for filing, we reached out to all candidates, regardless of their party affiliation, and made sure that there was no confusion about the process and that everybody knew that they had to be a registered Democrat in order to be considered for our process. So a couple of candidates, changed their registration at that point, and we're glad to have all the Democrats we can in Santa Monica. And then we, across all 4 races, I think there are 27 candidates who filed to run, and 20 of them are seeking this Democratic Club endorsement. So a couple of those 7 are not Democrats and are not planning on becoming Democrats anytime soon, which is fine. A few of the others were declined to state and decided to become Democrats for this process. And of those who did not submit for consideration, those who were not on our list are folks who became Democrats sometime in the last couple of months. And then when they saw our questionnaire, decided that they weren't going to seek our endorsement for one reason or another. So we have a very open process. We reached out to every single candidate on the filing deadline to make sure that they had our questionnaire in an email. And then we set a deadline 9 days after that by which they had to return the questionnaire. That was their indication they were interested in seeking our endorsement. And anyone who didn't submit it at that point, we further reached out and said, if you need a few extra hours to get this done, it's understandable, and gave a bit of an extension. So we tried to be as gracious as possible, to be as inclusive as possible, to get all the candidates who were interested to be able to be part of this process. And we're really grateful for those who did. So we have all of the Democrats who are running for office basically came through to seek our endorsement. And those who didn't, in my opinion, are making a statement that they don't really see the need in seeking the Democratic Club's endorsement. So we should take that into consideration as we think about how we want to vote this fall. Now, we have a great opportunity here to hear from the candidates who are running for city council, the Democratic candidates. And I personally have endorsed one of the candidates this year, Carolyn Torosis, which I've never done before, being the president of the Democratic Club. And so because of that, I felt it was a good idea to seek someone from outside the board to be the moderator for the city council debate, so that everything would be unbiased, fair, and we could have a real debate from all the candidates on the issues. And so I'm pleased to welcome from Westside Voice LA, a new organization, a journalistic enterprise covering the west side of Los Angeles. Its editor, Todd Flora, who we may remember from being on the Santa Monica Rent Control Board for 2 terms. So Todd, great to see you, and thanks so much for volunteering to do this today.
Thank you. Thank you for unmuting me, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Todd Flora. Some of you have known me for more than 20 years. West Side Voice went live May 2nd. West Side Voice, just a quick story. I had a tearful epiphany of what am I doing with my life in the peak of COVID. Went back to school for journalism in September 2020. Thought I should launch my own local news site that went live May 2nd. I call it West Side Voice. You can find it at westsidevoicela.com. I hope you all sign up for the newsletter and check in with the site regularly. The latest article I just posted this afternoon covers our two candidates for our state assembly district, AD 51. I want to make a couple of disclosures of my own that I think are warranted this evening. And that is when I ran for I was a previous office holder in Santa Monica on the rent control board, and that this club did endorse me twice in my campaigns in 2010 and 2014. I also think it's only fair to recognize that from 2016 to 2018, I served 2 years on that rent control board with Carolyn Torosis, and we served very well together. Let me explain the rules going forward. Tonight, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. The answers to several questions will give candidates each 1 minute in response. 30-second rebuttals will be given to any candidate whose name is mentioned in a negative manner by another candidate. So keep that in mind as you're making your comments, if it's really worth it to try for some kind of takedown. And then at the end, we'll offer 1 minute closing statements. Also, I'll be using the same randomizer that Melissa used last week. So it's not necessarily going to be a first person to respond is the last person the next time, and the last person is the first person. But I'm going to use this program, and I hope it works fairly effectively, and that people feel that, well, we've been random enough. Okay. So let's get going with 2 minute opening statements. And the first person in my randomizer is Ellis Raskin. Ellis, go ahead with your 2 minute opening statement. John will time you.
Thank you, Todd, and good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. My name is Ellis Raskin. I am an environmental attorney and the vice chair of the Santa Monica Planning Commission. I first got involved in politics here in Santa Monica, fighting evictions here in the Pico neighborhood, where I live as a renter, and in fact, I'm the only renter on the Planning Commission. For many years, we've seen the effects of gentrification and displacement and economic stratification in our city. We've seen the effects of people getting pushed out of their homes, and I've been fighting on the front lines for progressive values. I've been fighting to keep people in their homes, and I've been fighting for workers' rights. I am here standing up for progressive values, and I'm standing up for the people of Santa Monica. I'm here today because we need people who will take bold stands. We need people who will be bold leaders, and I'm going to do that. I've been endorsed by Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, Unite Here Local 11, Mayor Sue Himmelrich, the Heart of LA Democratic Club, and many others. I will be a voice for progressive values. I've stood for workers' rights. I've fought for living wages. I've fought against evictions. I will continue to fight to be your candidate. I don't think I'll need the full 2 minutes. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ellis. Next up, Carolyn Torosis.
Good evening. Yep. Can you all hear me okay? Yep. Good evening, Democrats. Thank you, Mr. Flora. It's great to be here and great to be with all of you. My name is Carolyn Torosis. I'm currently serving as your elected Rent Control Board Commissioner in my second term on the Rent Control Board, where we are fighting to make sure that our rent control charter law is upheld, that we are stabilizing our community so that folks can age in place with dignity, and where we are making sure that we are not passing on landlord expenses to many of our tenants whom are expecting reasonable rent increases year after year. And so I'm very proud that this year we've put an initiative on the ballot to cap rent increases for all rent controlled tenants at 3%. In my day life, I serve as Supervisor Holly Mitchell's Senior Deputy for Economic and Workforce Development at the County of LA. I'm an employment attorney where I started my career representing workers in cases of wage theft. The opportunity for economic success, the opportunity for mobility, the opportunity for everyone to start at the same starting line is intrinsic to the work that I've done throughout my career. I'm currently overseeing our county's $1.9 billion American Rescue Plan investments, where we are investing our money with an equity-based lens in the communities that have been historically disproportionately invested in. And I'm really proud that we're getting millions of dollars to our small women and BIPOC-owned businesses, to our workers who have been at the front lines of the pandemic. Some of the other work that I've done, I actually was one of the architects of the county's minimum wage ordinance and our wage enforcement program, where we contract with the city of Santa Monica. And why am I running for city council? I'm running for city council to bring civil discourse back to our city. I think that we should be tough on policy and respectful to people. I think that we can all work together because we want our city to be an inclusive, more affordable, more welcoming place for all of our residents and our stakeholders. And I want to spur our recovery in a progressive and forward-looking direction with all of you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Next up, Samantha Mota. 2 minutes opening statement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Samantha Mota. I'm a Santa Monica native, Pico neighborhood renter, gardener, community activist, and the youngest candidate running for city council. I'm no stranger to serving this community. I got my start with Climate Action Santa Monica, empowering youth to take the reins of the fight against climate change. I also serve with the Santa Monica Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, working alongside fellow residents to review and propose new law enforcement policies and reforms to Santa Monica City Council. In 2021, I was humbled to receive the Premio de Orgullo Award for Hispanic Heritage Month by the Santa Monica Hispanic Heritage Committee with the support of City Council for my advocacy to expand community access to gardening opportunities to combat food insecurity while fostering a new era of self-sustainable urban living. Gentrification, displacement, homelessness, and climate change are on the rise, and our communities are struggling in Santa Monica. Together, we can improve our city and reimagine what Santa Monica has the capability of becoming. Let's make it more affordable, diverse, equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and livable for generations to come. Bring the voice of the community to the table, so don't forget to vote SM for SM. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Armen Melkonians, you're up next for a 2-minute opening statement.
Hi, everyone. Hi there, everyone. Thank you for having me. Armen Melkonians, candidate for Santa Monica City Council. I am a civil and environmental engineer by trade. I am the founder of Residocracy. Done some great civic engagement in the past. Brought a lot of voices to City Hall that didn't traditionally have any. And I'm running for City Council because I'm a father of a 4-year-old. I'm a husband, and I see what's happening to our city in terms of public safety, in terms of the economic destruction that's happened across our city, and it's not rebounding. I think that public safety is our #1 concern at City Hall. I'm running to bring balance back, that Santa Monica is run like a real city is, that we have issues that we need to resolve, that we're not dealing with policies that are pie in the sky policies, but taking things back to the basics of what it takes to run a city. I am proud to be endorsed by the Police Officers Association, by the Santa Monica Firefighters Association, by 4 of the current council members, Phil Brock, Oscar De La Torre, Christine Parra, and Lana Negrete, all Democrats. And I'm a Democrat, and I would like your endorsement. I'm here to answer some tough questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Natalya Zernitskaya. 2-minute opening statement.
All right. So, as a refugee from the former Soviet Union, you have no idea what a privilege it is to stand before a Democratic club. As a Jewish family living in Belarus, the idea of living in a democratic society was merely a dream until the day we were able to suddenly flee and make our way to America. My democratic values were shaped from that experience. In my first years in America, when food stamps and food pantries and other government safety nets helped my family achieve a better life, I'm a lifelong Democrat. Those experiences that I had as a child are why I wanted to move to Santa Monica as an adult in the first place. I wanted to be part of the city because it was a community that put people first. Although it took me 4 years to find an apartment that I could afford here, it didn't stop me from planting roots here and getting involved in Santa Monica organizations that support a just, equitable, affordable, and sustainable city. 12 years later, I'm running for Santa Monica City Council because the Santa Monica that I moved to seems to be slipping away. I'm running because as a Pico neighborhood renter, I want all families to have safe and affordable housing. I'm running to use my experience as a financial analyst to help our city recover from the pandemic and recession so that we can restore city services and expand critical programs to help fight homelessness and create more local living wage jobs. I'm running for Santa Monica City Council because I want to make sure that every generation can thrive here, so our children can have great schools and our older adults can live in dignity and age in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go on, John, if you'll forgive me, those of you in comments, keep in mind your arguments are probably persuading very few, and they pop up while speakers are speaking. So let's learn to be right maybe some other day. Just a suggestion. Next up for opening statements is Jesse Zwick. 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you. My name, as you mentioned, Todd, is Jesse Zwick, and I'm running for City Council to address our housing and homelessness crisis. I got into politics because I could not keep numbing myself to the suffering occurring every day on our streets. So I began volunteering for a homeless services organization nearly every weekend for 5 years. But I got tired of the fact that every time I helped get someone off the streets and on a path to housing, I'd see 2 more people immediately take their place on the street. Tired of meeting young parents who were too afraid to let their kids run around their local park or neighborhood. Because this crisis is hurting all of us, and the worse it gets, the more it's succeeding in hardening our hearts. So I started fighting for policies to keep people in their homes and candidates who were brave enough to advocate for them. And I served as Director of Communications for Councilmember Natalya Armen and Mike Bonin in that fight. And in studying this issue and working on it day in and day out, I came to realize that all healthy cities do the same 3 things. They have strong rent control laws, they subsidize housing for people who can't afford to pay market rate rents, and they have enough housing options overall so rents don't keep soaring for the vast majority of folks without access to a subsidized unit. Remove any one of these pillars and your community starts to break down. And that's what's happening in Santa Monica, where our inability to solve this crisis is giving rise to a new and uglier politics. One where resentment and anger and fear are a seemingly inexhaustible fuel that's empowering right-wing forces that swept to power 2 years ago. I'm talking about people that don't believe in basic civil rights or affordable housing, people who think there's no problem that more police funding can't solve, people who want to kill rent control. These are the people who are going to take over if we don't allow new progressive voices and new progressive solutions to take on our biggest problems. I'm a public policy advisor, a renter, and a father. I've worked in city government and on the front lines of homeless outreach with direct experience getting people housed. And I'm running because the progressive soul of our city is at stake. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And finally, for opening statements, Mr. Troy Harris, 2 minutes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Troy Harris. I come to you from sunny Santa Monica. I am a renter. I am a director of international sales at UPS. I am an Airbnb host, and I'm running for Santa Monica City Council. The reason I'm running for City Council is because I once was down in Santa Monica, literally. I wasn't taking care of myself, and the fire department came there to my rescue. And since then, I've changed my life for the better, and now I want to change it for the community that was there to save me. I have 3+1 ideas as my platform. The first one is to implement a commercial vacancy tax that's going to encourage commercial landlords to put businesses back into their places so that we can have enough of the city budget to hire police to keep our streets safe. The presence of police officers is going to deter crime. We have a homelessness crisis, and I want to approach it in two different ways, which is to have more beds in the region and to implement a program called DIGS, which stands for Demerits in Addition to Gold Stars, which is an incentive program that'll help give cash to the people that help themselves. I also want to help out housing because I know that it's a social justice issue as much as it is an affordability issue. I was once in the JCs and was a commissioner on the Clean Beaches and Ocean Partial Tax Committee, as well as a volunteer for the Boys and Girls Club. I've been endorsed by David Pizarra, which is a commissioner for the Human Services Committee, and I would be glad to have your vote come November 8th. My name is Troy Harris.
Thank you, Troy. Now, everybody, we're going to be going into the questions where you'll provide 1-minute responses. And this first category, the first 3 questions are sort of general governance questions. And the randomizer has determined that, Troy, we're going to stay with you first. So the first question to you is, in your view, what is the role of the city council?
The role of the city council is to hire 3 positions. The first is to hire the city manager, who oversees the entire staff, including the police and fire department. The second role is to hire the city attorney, which is the legal arm of the City of Santa Monica Corporation that'll help out with any legal needs. And the third, which is also very important, is to hire the city clerk. Together, these 4 bodies, they work to represent the people of Santa Monica. You empower the city council to do what you say. And by putting people in position that reflects your ideas and that hear you and act on what you're wishing for, that's how you can control your city. So really, the control is in the power of the people, which is the truest way to run a democracy, in my opinion. And I would be happy to be on that city council.
Okay, same question to you. What is your view of the role of the city council, Natalya?
I think that the role of the city council is to look out for the city as a whole. I understand that we are a city where a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about a lot of different things. I believe the role of the city council is to take all of those into consideration when we're determining what the best policy is, and to not just think about the Santa Monica of today or the Santa Monica of the past, but to think about the Santa Monica of the future and really craft the best policy that's going to work for future Santa Monicans of all ages, backgrounds, and all of those other fun things. So, you know, we're city council members looking out for everyone in the city, not just some folks.
Okay, thank you. Same question to you, Samantha, followed by Armen, followed by Carolyn.
So I believe the role of the city council is not just to support the interests of the city council, but also those of the community that we are here to serve. You know, implementing policies and programs that best reflect our values and who we want to be in the future. We must also look to the past and today to determine our future for tomorrow. And the greatest way to do that is our youth, and hopefully I can advocate for more youth and involvement in government. You know, I think that's a huge role for city council too, is empowering our community to speak out and be more engaged and involved in city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Armen. What is the role of what do you feel the role is of the city council?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Todd. The #1 goal of the city council is to keep the city safe and clean for residents, for our businesses, and for everyone who comes to our city. That's the number one goal, which we've been failing at. But the traditional role of our city council is to make the decisions necessary to run our city, to set the budget, to create the legislation, and to create policy to run the city. That's why I'm running for city council, is because we need a balance back in our city council that takes care of the basics of running a city. For the last 20, 30 years, we've been focusing way too much on policies. We have spent $150 million building a 50,000 square foot green building when our city is falling apart. We need to get back to basics. We need to make the tough decisions to run a city, a safe city, a clean city, a city where businesses can thrive and residents can have a great quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Hi, thanks, Todd. So the role of our city government fundamentally is to ensure that all of our city services work, are running, that we serve as the executive, and that our residents, our stakeholders, our businesses are safe and protected. And part of that means transparency, making sure, again, with checks and balances, we are the oversight mechanism over all of our city departments, making sure that they're working effectively, that they're serving where they're supposed to, that the outcomes are appropriate given how much we're budgeting. And I would agree that the budgeting here is key. Our city is recovering from an unprecedented recession. Part of the role of a council member is going to be to come in, make sure that our staff feel supported, usher in economic recovery so that we can encourage more revenue to the city, and make sure that we're hiring folks back so that we have enough staff to be able to perform all of our services. And then finally, I would say that government's role generally is to stand in the gap for residents who need our help. And so we are here to help our residents, to lift up those among us who need us, because I do believe that the rising tide lifts all boats.
Okay, thank you. Jesse, followed by Ellis. The role of the city council.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with many have spoken before. I think a role of a city council member is to balance the many competing views of the community. I'm a utilitarian at heart, and I believe it's my job to create policies that do the most good for the most people. And also, yes, to be a safety net for those that fall down, because we're better when we all lift each other up. I think that at its core, cities are often most responsible for public safety and for land use and regulations of what can go where and how. Public safety extends to both our traditional law enforcement and emergency services, but also our streets and how safe they are to children and elderly people. And land use and zoning sounds quite dry, but actually contains the decisions that underlie our housing and homelessness crisis, our climate crisis, where 90% of our workforce must commute from somewhere else into our city, and our social justice crisis in terms of who gets to live here and take advantage of our high resource neighborhoods. And when it comes to balancing all of these competing priorities, as Natalya said, some of those people haven't been born yet. It's our job not just to weigh the decisions and the welfare of people here, but to also weigh the welfare of people who can't weigh in yet, our children and future generations to come, to make sure that this is a sustainable community. Thank you.
And finally, Ellis.
Thanks. I agree with a lot of what's been said before, but I think it's important to emphasize that city council members and really all elected officials in America are the living embodiment of the democratic process and are supposed to be a voice for the people. As those of you who know me can attest, I have been one of the most accessible public officials here in Santa Monica. I'll return your calls, I'll meet with you, I'll return your emails. And it's really the role of our leaders in city council to be a forum for the people to address the leaders in our government and to meet with people, to understand what's going on in our society and to understand how we can do better. It's the role of the city council to step up for those who are worst off in our society and to make sure that those who are most vulnerable are getting the protections that they need. If we're truly to consider ourselves progressives, then we need to understand that city council members need to step up for those who don't have a voice in our society. And I agree that we need to do everything we can to make city council as transparent and open as possible so that our leaders really can be a voice for the people.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go to another question that's going to start with Natalya and then go to Troy and Jesse. And that question is, budgets are a reflection of a city's values. What are your top 3 budget priorities, Natalya?
My top 3 are housing and homelessness, public safety, and economic recovery. Because homelessness impacts all of us, and so does housing. We all need somewhere to live in order to actually do what we want to do with our lives. So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing keeping people in their homes and getting people who are unhoused into housing, as well as providing the wraparound services that they need in order to stay housed. So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing that in our budget. Public safety, which includes a lot, as some folks before me have said. Public safety encompasses everything from being able to cross the street safely to not being a victim of a crime when you're just walking down the street and not getting your car broken into, not getting your home broken into. We need to address all aspects of public safety, and we need to make sure that we're allocating the dollars where they need to go in order to keep us the most safe and allocating our resources appropriately. And the last thing, the economic recovery, we need to make sure that we have the dollars that we need in order to do what we need. And business tax revenue drives a lot of our revenues. That's what's allowing us to pay for all of the excellent programs and services that we have, like our libraries, our public parks, everything else. So we need to make sure that businesses are set up to succeed.
Thank you, John. I didn't see a clock on that one. Could we be sure and get that going? Troy, what are your top 3 budget priorities?
My top 3 budget priorities are crime, homelessness, and economic recovery. Crime. If you don't have your safety, you have nothing at all. We have to keep our streets and people safe. It's very important. That's why I would trust the Santa Monica Police Department to have a fully staffed like never before department, because with their presence, there's going to be less and less crimes happening in our city. And that's so important. Another aspect is a macroeconomic with the state. There's Prop 47, and it's making it harder to stop crime because crimes that used to be felonies are now misdemeanors. And it's really hard to stop the cycle of crime and also the addiction, because felonies had a drug prevention program that no longer is helping people stop what damage they're causing to themselves. Homelessness. I really want to address homelessness, and I really want to address the business economic recovery.
Okay, hopefully you'll have a chance to do that, Troy. Thank you. Jesse, top 3 budget priorities.
Excuse me, there we go. I think we all want to be safe. We all want to do something about homelessness, and we all want this to be the kind of community that we can raise our children in. But as some have already said, we're not going to be able to fund any of these progressive priorities without first reviving our economy. And there's a few things that go into that. The first is really a reinvestment in basic services and the things that kind of made us an appealing place to raise a family, an appealing place to take your family on vacation. Things as basic as sanitation, increased presence of both ambassadors and police officers in the downtown area, and allowing our community also to be a growing community, one where more people can visit, where more residents can live here and spend their money on local businesses. And once you get to that, then you're going to be able to have the money we need to make the investments in affordable housing, to expand our mental health outreach teams, to hire our public safety officers back to the full force that they need to be. And that's what I hope to do.
Thank you. Top 3 budget priorities, Ellis, followed by Armen, then Samantha, then Carolyn. Ellis, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you have to look at this from the perspectives of balance, equity, and sustainability. We're at a point now where our city is coming out of the long-term COVID crisis. And as somebody who works my private life advising public agencies across California about how to plan for the long-term future, we need to continue to look at how we can help our local community move forward out of the COVID pandemic while addressing some both short-term and long-term crises. Homelessness is one of those. We need to make sure that we have the resources available here, and we need to work with regional partners across the area to make sure that we can provide the services that are needed to get people off the street into supportive housing and into shelters. In terms of sustainability, we need to make sure that we're putting the resources where they need to be to address climate change and to make sure that our city is prepared to address a future that will be affected by global warming. And we need to make sure that we have the resources available to keep renters in their homes. But ultimately, we have some real challenges ahead in terms of our long-term budgeting, in terms of addressing our long-term pension liability. So we've got quite a ways to go, and I'm looking forward to doing it.
Okay, thank you. Armen, what are your top 3 budget priorities?
Well, we're budgeted for a maximum of 221 sworn officers already. We just have a shortage at 174. So we need to ramp that up for public safety. But I do believe that we need to increase our public safety budgets as well, as we have not set new public safety caps for 20 years now, even after the arrival of the metro and the growth that we've experienced in Santa Monica and different kinds of demands that we've had on our public safety system. So we do need to definitely ramp up that budget. I think that we took a $200 million slash in our budget in terms of public employees throughout the COVID downturn. We need to build that back up through our economic recovery and bring back the staffing levels that we need to service our residents, our businesses, and the city services. Reopen up our libraries. We need to get back to our senior services that are missing. So we need to put that balance again back into our city government. I think moving forward, our infrastructure.
We're running on time. Armen, wrap it up. Go ahead and finish your thought.
So infrastructure, we've neglected our infrastructure moving forward, and we need to get back to that and start putting some money into it.
Okay, thank you. Samantha, top 3 budget priorities.
So my first budget priority would be economic recovery, and a great policy for that would be AB 551, and I'll continue to be a pillar for that. It's a urban agriculture incentive zone. It aims to incentivize urban agriculture, and basically this would also generate a lot of revenue if we actually sell a lot of the produce to our community, making it more affordable and accessible. So that's another great way. I think my second priority would be finding solutions to the drug, homelessness, and mental health crisis. So I would view that from a housing first approach, getting our most vulnerable into housing or into apartments instead of shelters, and with that, and doing that without requisitions. So I would continue to be a voice for more outreach and overdose sites, intervention programs, housing, psychiatric beds, and a wide variety of other programs. And sorry, thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna have to move on. Carolyn, top 3 budget priorities.
No surprise, I've said this publicly: economic recovery, public safety and homelessness, and housing are my top 3. However, I want to talk a little bit more specifically on economic recovery, something that we've done really successfully at the county that I want to try to implement in Santa Monica. We need to appoint permitting ombudspersons for different types of projects, because I know firsthand in helping businesses work through their permitting process, especially as we have new businesses that are trying to reopen or open for the first time in the city. We have to make our entitlement process easier for businesses to open, so that we can get folks back to earning revenue. We should do that by establishing one-stop meetings for new projects that will create a certain number of jobs, et cetera, and make sure the city agencies all come together in one place. We have a lot of trouble at the rent agency of having the city agencies come together. On the public safety side, and that's tied into homelessness. I know we have not fully staffed our police department. I'm not prepared to say we need more people until fully staff what we currently have.
Please wrap up.
Sorry, the city of Santa Monica is not at the table with LAHSA, the LA Homeless Services Authority. There is approximately $350 to $400 million.
Okay, please wrap up, Carolyn.
Coming down from LAHSA. We are not leveraging that money. We need to be in the discussion and increase the pod program. Thank you.
Okay. Watch that clock, people. I don't want to have to get nasty. It occurs to me, I have not made clear, one of my other things I wanted to say up front, and I did not before we started. The questions I'm asking tonight belong to the club. not to West Side Voice. They are the club's questions. I did have a little input with the authors, but the questions do belong to the club. So our third general governance question is the following, and we're going to start this time with Troy, then Carolyn, and then Natalya. With Republicans and conservatives working to undermine public trust in government, Democrats must continue to champion transparency. One of the candidates in this race, who chose not to compete for the club's endorsement, cast a deciding vote against the investigation of ongoing leaks from legally protected city employment discussions. If you're elected, what will you do to get those leaks properly investigated and to restore trust in the city council? Troy?
Top of my list is integrity. It's something that I learned from UPS, and I take great pride in doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. And I was there that day when the idea of having it be supported and then going the other way and saying, let's not have this investigated happen. And I said to myself, I didn't make a fuss, but I wouldn't have done that. I would have followed through because the consequences fall where they may, and we have to answer for those because justice must be served. It doesn't have favorites, it just is. And so I side with the truth. It's a shame that it happened. It wouldn't have happened with me on the board. And so I would just support that moving forward. You don't have violations of the Brown Act, and when investigations are in need, you follow through with them, and that you stick with what you choose, and the rest will just tell itself.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Hi, unequivocally, without question, I would have voted in favor of the investigation. People who do the right thing wouldn't have anything to hide. We have to make sure that as council members, we uphold the law and uphold the highest level of integrity. We are an example for the rest of the city. I've campaigned on transparency at the rent board. I believe in transparency in government. That's why I came to work in it. We need to make sure we're following the law. All I can say is that we don't necessarily need a council vote to have the city attorney investigate this. We still can. And I think that we should. And if I were elected to council, I would make sure that we got to the bottom of that, because we need to be transparent to our public if they are at all going to trust and have faith in government.
Okay, thank you. Natalya, what would you do to make sure those leaks get properly investigated and to restore trust in the city council?
I know that after a year, the quote unquote losing side of a vote can bring something back as if it was what was formerly known as a 13 item, now 16 item. So I would hope to bring back a proposal for an independent investigation. I understand that the city attorney could investigate, but there might be some potential appearance of conflicts, if not actual conflicts. So I would support an independent investigation. I have been a champion for transparency and accountability through my service on the audit subcommittee. And I served as the president of the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica for 4 years. So I understand not only what the Brown Act means, but the importance of those government transparency and accountability laws.
Okay, Armen, to you.
Todd, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question at all.
Yeah, you want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
With Republicans and conservatives working to undermine public trust in government, Democrats must continue to champion transparency. One of the candidates in this race, who chose not to compete for the club's endorsement, cast a deciding vote against the investigation of ongoing leaks from legally protected city employment discussions. If you're elected, what will you do to get those leaks properly investigated and to restore trust in the city council?
Well, leaks are never a good thing, and we know that they happen all over the place in our government. I'm not familiar with the incident, so it's hard for me to opine on it. However, I could tell you that the vitriol that's involved in our day-to-day politics is extreme. You can see it in the comments section where I'm getting attacked every time I speak. You can see it where Jesse Zwick calls the change slate candidates right wingers when they're all Democrats. Oscar De La Torre is the biggest Democrat on the city council. Phil Brock is a Democrat. Christine Parra is a Democrat. And there, you know, the labeling and the vitriol that's disgusting from the so-called progressives. So that's the reason that the residents have lost trust in our government. It's not about one simple leak. It's what's happening across our country. The attacks back and forth. Nothing's getting done. Policies are being pushed. Money's getting traded.
Okay, wrap it up.
That's it.
Finish your thought, Armen.
That's it. So I
Okay,
just,
that's it.
we have to get to a place where we can work together.
Okay, Jesse, would you like to respond? 30 seconds.
Sure. Being to the right or to the left have nothing to do with your political party. We here in Los Angeles are a majority Democratic city, but we have many different views on the issues, specifically around public safety and land use and a whole other issues. And I think the majority of people in this room would not dispute the fact that there has been a strong rightward shift in this city and on this council in the last 2 years, and that has been detrimental to our city as a whole. I would like to get back to the historic progressive roots that our city stands for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Back to our question, what would you do to get those leaks properly investigated and restore trust in the city council, Samantha? 1 minute.
I would definitely uphold the Brown Act to the utmost standard. If we haven't learned from the investigation with SMPD, I mean, I hate to say it, but our community does not trust our local government, including our police department. And I would agree with Natalya in bringing independent investigation to do this, so we have transparency, credibility, accountability, and most importantly, we can uphold our systems to the integral standards that we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question to you, Jesse, back to you on the investigations question.
Sure. On the specific vote in question, I would have certainly voted for an independent investigation into the leaks and the violations of the Brown Act that almost certainly occurred. But I think on the topic more broadly, I think independence is a good way to think about how we can restore trust in government. And I think, you know, traditionally in city government, the biggest areas of corruption historically have had to do with real estate and developers, where politicians who have a lot of discretion in the development process have been caught accepting bribes and other sort of inducements to approve specific projects in our community. I think as council members, it shouldn't be our job to vote up and down on specific businesses or projects in our city. Instead, we should craft policies and set rules of the road that talk about the levels of affordability and other things that we want in our community, and then let these decisions happen administratively and remove ourselves from that process so as to remove any appearance of bias and better create trust in government. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ellis, your answer to this, and then we'll move on.
Thanks. I'll preface my answer by saying that in my day job, I regularly advise public agencies across California and other stakeholders about the Brown Act and about conflict of interest issues. And in fact, I was co-counsel on a major Brown Act case that went all the way to the Court of Appeal regarding a parkland swap in one city that was negotiated behind closed doors. So I definitely understand the stakes that are implicated by decisions that are made behind closed doors and behind these kinds of leaks. It's really important for our city to have leaders who understand the law, who are well versed in the Brown Act, in conflict of interest issues, and who take good governance seriously. And most importantly, who just have good character and are people of integrity. I'll tell you that we actually have quite a few avenues available to us in our city to continue to investigate potential leaks, both in partnership with our city attorney's office and also in partnership with other enforcement officials across California, including the Attorney General's office and others. And I look forward to leveraging those partnerships to get to the bottom of the truth.
Okay, well timed. Thank you, Ellis. Now we're going to move on to 5 questions regarding homelessness and housing. And the first one is, last night, City Council discussed a first reading of an ordinance that would ban unhoused individuals from resting in doorways. Would you have supported the initiative? Why or why not? And we're going to start this time with Jesse.
I don't think banning homelessness has ever shown itself to be effective at actually solving homelessness. We can try to push it from doorway to doorway. We can arrest people and then release them the next day. But there's a huge sort of polarizing fight going on in the entire region around this idea of, do we solve this with police officers? Do we solve this with social workers? Do we allow people to be homeless here or there? When the truth of the matter is the only way we're going to solve homelessness is with more housing. And that is just a simple truth. When we look at cities across the nation, we see that the only thing that correlates with high levels of homelessness is high rents, not anything else. And if we're going to actually make progress on this, we need to actually focus on the issue that's driving it and not create sort of sideshow debates and other things that get people excited, but do nothing to actually solve the underlying problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question to Natalya, followed by Carolyn, followed by Ellis. Natalya, go ahead. 1 minute.
I did get a chance to watch some of last night's city council meeting and listen to some of the discussion about this proposed ordinance. Currently, we do have an ordinance that bans sitting or laying down in doorways within the downtown area. So my understanding was this was going to expand it. So something that I hadn't considered about it was the safety aspect, where if somebody is blocking a door, it's a fire hazard. So while I don't think we should criminalize homelessness because it's just people existing who don't happen to have a roof and we need to get folks housed, we also do need to be mindful of ensuring that if there's a fire, people can walk out of a door. So while I am very opposed to anti-homeless architecture, I think it was an interesting discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the council decides to do next on it.
Okay, Carolyn, your thoughts on last night's initiative,
Yeah.
proposed initiative?
Generally speaking, I think we need to address the root cause of our homeless crisis, and it's both an affordability issue and a mental health issue. And I agree with my counterpart here. Banning homelessness, sweeping up our streets has never solved the problem. Why is that? Because where does the person go when you criminalize homelessness? Just for context, so everyone knows, for every about 100,000 folks that you have that live in a city, you're supposed to have 50 inpatient mental health beds. The city of Santa Monica has 0. And you know where the closest ones are? They're at Harbor UCLA down in Torrance. So our police, can pick these folks up out of the doorways, but where are these folks going to go? How are we going to transport them all the way down to Torrance? We need to say yes to more types of housing. We need to say yes to working with our partners. This is a regional crisis. This is not a city of Santa Monica only issue. We have to be working more collaboratively with our LASA funded mental health street outreach teams. And we have to be securing more units of both interim housing and permanent housing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ellis, question goes to you, then Armen, then Troy, then Samantha. Ellis, go ahead for 1 minute.
Yeah, banning where people can sleep is the wrong approach, and I think it implicates some real legal problems with the Boise decision. But to the point, our city really just doesn't have the shelter capacity or the mental health services capacity to address the real problem. I think Carolyn really hit the nail on the head with that issue here. And to that point, we live in a city where, by most estimates, approximately 75% of unhoused individuals are experiencing some form of mental health issue or addiction or both together. We need to make sure that we're investing in the appropriate resources. We need to make sure that we actually have meaningful shelter space with wraparound social services to get people off the street. And like people have said before, we also need to address the underlying institutional and structural bases that lead to housing insecurity and homelessness in the first place. And this is a regional issue. This is something that goes beyond the borders of Santa Monica, though. I know many people here in Santa Monica who are at risk of becoming homeless tomorrow. But we need to work with regional partners to address this systematically.
Okay, Armen, where are you on the reading of the ordinance that would ban unhoused individuals from resting in doorways?
Short answer is yes. I would have voted to ban people from sleeping in private doorways. We're talking about private doorways. We're not talking about public buildings. We're not talking about churches. We're talking about private buildings. Absolutely, I would have voted for it. Number one priority in Santa Monica, to me, and all of the voters that I've talked to, is public safety, cleanliness. I urge anybody who's listening to this video, this Sunday, drive down Ocean Boulevard from Montana to the pier. there is a row of parking on the Oceanside meters. You won't see a single car parked there on a Sunday at 1 in the afternoon. We are losing our shirts in Santa Monica. It's because of the filth, it's because of the crime, it's because of the disgust. We need to take care of it. We don't have a single person parking to come to the beach on a Sunday at 1 in the afternoon. That is a travesty. We need to take care of our problems today as they exist. Homelessness is a regional problem. It's not our problem. We need to be a part of that solution, but only a part of that solution. So
Wrap up,
yes.
please.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Troy,
I watched that last night and I would have supported it because I believe in the power of deterrence. Friction helps. It's not going to solve the problem, but if it's more difficult to do something, then less people will do it. I know that there is the Boise Act that was mentioned before, and so it's illegal to wake somebody up who's sleeping anywhere else, but in a doorway, that would work for me. I believe in rehab, so this law has to be met with rehab. As a person who's struggled to overcome addiction and I know what it's like, and I know that it's possible, and people need help. And if the society can come to their support, they can ultimately come to the decision, and it comes down to them as a person individually to do it. But if we're able to get them the rehab that they need and start to peel away the onion from the other issues like crime, like domestic violence, like drug use, like mental health, then we can help them get to a coherent state and say, I'm done with the drugs. And so we also want to hold other cities accountable to get their homeless back to their cities. And that's what I would do.
okay, very, very good. Thank you. Finally, on this question, Samantha.
I definitely would not support the ordinance because I don't believe in criminalizing homelessness. And I agree with a lot of what the other candidates said, Jesse, Natalya, Ellis, Caroline, that we need to do this from a housing first approach without requisitions, and providing more funding for policies and programs that help our vulnerable and really don't have a voice here at this table. And I mean, I think also though, it requires a lot more than housing to solve homelessness. It means changing our mental health structure, increasing family support, substance abuse systems, raising wages, expanding the federal housing voucher program, and building more subsidized homes. And I think that's where we need to do in city council and bring more of a voice there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samantha. The next question is meant to be a very short answer question. Basically, which one do you support? And the question is, do you support measure GS or measure DT? Samantha, first to you, then Troy, then Jesse, then Armen.
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yes, do you support measure GS or measure DT on this year's ballot?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
No, which of the two?
Oh, I would say GT.
GS?
The GS, yeah.
Which was sponsored by Mayor Himmelrich. Is that the one, or?
Yes, I support.
DT, which was sponsored.
Yeah, I support.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I support Himmelrich's measure because it provides more revenue for the city. It pays an average of about $50 million a year for homelessness prevention and affordable housing, as well as schools.
Thank you. Troy, GS or DT on this year's ballot?
I support GS because $50 million to the cause I support is something I can get behind.
Thank you. Jesse, your answer. GS or DT?
I support Mr. GS.
Armen?
Bill Brock's measure DT.
You support DT, okay. Natalya?
I support Measure GS because we need to be setting the standard for what a progressive city looks like, and we need to fund housing, and we can do it ourselves locally. At least for part of it, we still need money from other sources too.
Okay, thank you. Ellis and then Carolyn, which of the two do you support?
Well, I was fighting on the front lines to make sure that GS was on the ballot and to make sure that GS is supported. And I could talk about this for a long time, but I'll just say GS.
Okay. Carolyn,
I support Measure GS, and we need even more. We need our state leaders to step up too. I think we all agree, we all just spoke that housing and the availability of housing is our #1 priority. We got to get more money for housing, period.
okay, thank you. All right, the next question, we'll start with Ellis, then go to Natalya, then Troy. And the question is, what, if anything, would you like to have seen done differently in the city's 2022 housing element? The housing element is really 2021 to 2029, but I understand the spirit of the question. What, if anything, would you like to have seen done differently in the city's housing element?
Yeah, well, this is
Ellis.
a question I know well, having worked on the planning commission for the past 2 years, trying to get us a compliant housing element that will get us the housing that we need over the cycle. It's an incredibly challenging time to be working on housing elements, especially in Santa Monica, given the very high proportion of affordable units we need to build. And frankly, a real challenge is making sure that we have the funding in place to get those units. I don't think that there's going to be sufficient turnover in our sites to get us those units through inclusionary housing, and I'm not sure that the market will support the 30,000 units that we would need to get the affordable units through inclusionary programs. That being said, I think that in retrospect, I think we did a pretty good job, and I think that we can always do more to work towards transit-oriented development and housing protections to keep people in their homes. But we've got assurances that the housing element we have is good enough for HCD.
Okay. All right, thank you. What would you like to have seen done differently in the housing element? Natalya, followed by Troy.
This might be a little too specific for some folks, so I apologize in advance. But the minimum square footage of a lot per unit. Currently in our zoning requirements, we have a maximum number of units that can be built per square foot for the different multifamily residentially zoned areas. So for certain areas, it requires at least 900 square feet of lot size per unit, and there are unit caps. So we know that a lot of currently existing buildings that are affordable today, because they were built with slightly different either parking standards or square footage requirements, et cetera, are not legal to be built today. So we need to use some of the knowledge we've had from the past to build a more affordable housing for the future, or more affordable housing, period. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Troy, question to you. What would you like to have seen done differently in the housing element?
I understand why they slammed it through, because we were under the gun with HCD, but I commend them for getting it done in the time that they did. But had they had more time, or if I would have had some input on there, I would have changed this. Right now, affordable housing is all concentrated into certain areas of the city. And if it were possible through upzoning, which is something that I'm all for, I would change the zones that have single family housing and have the ability to have multifamily housing on there. Not that everything will become multifamily housing, but you have the ability to do it. And that will enable there to be more variety in the community, in the city, because right now, as we have it, the city has certain sections and people, they don't leave their area and that's all they get to see. But if you have diversity throughout, and you can have a generally single family neighborhood, but with a mix of multifamily housing, and you can have multifamily neighborhoods with some single family housing. And that way you have just different districts within the city, but a variety of everybody mixed in overall.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go next to Samantha, followed by Jesse, followed by Carolyn, with Armen having the last word on the housing element. Samantha Mota, to you.
Definitely something I would change on the housing element is creating more transit-oriented housing, as well as expanding our transits and like bike lanes, metro into other neighborhoods, and as well as bringing SB 9 and 10 to upzone and end single family housing, single family zoning, because R2 and R3 zones are primarily the most developed on. And so by opening up space, it would allow accessibility to regions in our neighborhoods that would often be untouched or unreachable to some of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse?
Yeah, I think overall I'm fairly happy with where the council landed. I think there are still some complaints that are valid about whether we are affirmatively furthering fair housing and making sure that housing is being built in traditionally exclusionary parts of our city. But I think what I was really displeased with was the process that by which we got to this point. There was a much less good non-compliant housing element that was submitted. There was a lot of kicking and screaming. It resulted in us instead of trying to fight the state, talking about suing the state, and otherwise falling out of compliance with the state, which actually risks a lot of things for our city. Risks losing state and federal funding. It risks losing all local control over our zoning laws, like we saw with a developer using the builder's remedy to propose a project down in the beach cities. So I think that what I would have really changed is the process by which we got to this point. I am happy that we are looking to increase our capacity on our commercial corridors. I think they're really lacking in vitality and life, and we could really use more mixed use projects along our transit corridors to really improve our boulevards and make them into wonderful places where people want to work and live and shop.
Thank you. Carolyn, to you, housing element.
Yeah, so I said this in my questionnaire, I'll say it again. I support the housing element that was ultimately adopted. Although, like my counterpart just said, I was very disappointed in the process, and for a slightly different reason. We had the planning department come to the rent control board a couple of times for our feedback, and I really felt like our feedback wasn't taken into account. Really felt like the early drafts of the housing element were not sufficiently specific as to how we were actually going to reach the number of units that we were required to reach. And the whole concept of affirmatively furthering fair housing is that we are supposed to build deed restricted affordable housing and housing in high opportunity, high resource areas, so that we can ensure that everyone has the same access to our quality schools, our community amenities, our clean beaches, our parks. And so we need to make sure that our housing is built throughout the city and not just in the Pico neighborhood. I'm glad that we have a compliant.
Please wrap up.
And I hope that we're specific enough on how we're going to get there.
Okay, and finally, on this question, Armen, your thoughts?
I think we had to come up with a housing element that met the arena numbers. I think it was a missed opportunity, though. I think we should have gone back and renegotiated with the state. I think that we got the second highest affordable housing unit target per square mile in the region. Santa Monica's done a great job providing housing, affordable housing, as a percentage of all the housing that we built in the past. And sometimes when you do something well and good, and you do it to a great level, more is asked of you. But the reality is we need to deal with our infrastructure. The last time the infrastructure element was updated was as part of the LUCE for the city of Santa Monica back in 2010. And that's been blown apart already. We can't handle the growth in terms of what's being planned for our city. So the housing element is one of 5 of the elements within our general plan. It needs to be consistent. We need to go back. We need to talk to them and say, look, we just can't handle this.
Okay, moving to the next question, and I'm going to hit the randomizer again. Jesse will start, followed by Troy and Natalya, to the following question. And this is meant to be largely a yes/no question. So you've got a minute, but consider your temptations to expand so we can keep on track here. Yes, no, do you support deregulating Airbnb and other short-term rentals? Jesse?
No, I think that Airbnb is one of many factors that is contributing to our current housing crisis. I think that we need to make sure that all of our available housing units are available for long-term permanent residents of our city.
Okay, thank you. Troy?
Yes, I would deregulate Airbnb housing because you have individuals like me who are dealing with being in the second highest stressed out suburb in America, Santa Monica, and Airbnb provides you with a way to rise out of your situation and have a more livable income.
Okay, Natalya, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I don't support deregulation of Airbnbs. We need to make sure that our housing is used for long-term residents and not just folks who are visiting. There's hotels for that. I do understand there's a balance and we can get into that later, but in short, no.
Okay, thank you. Armen, do we deregulate Airbnb and other rental programs or apps?
It's not such a simple answer. I think that, you know, if there's ownership rights involved, it's not so simple. We don't want to lose our apartment stock for sure. You know, we don't want apartment buildings to become hotels. You know, that should be regulated 100%. But it's not such a simple answer. You know, if Troy is going to rent something out to somebody and he's living in the unit and he's supplementing his income, he's not removing from the rental stock. So it's not a simple answer, but definitely we should not turn apartment buildings into hotels. That's not the intent of an Airbnb. That's not even the intent of what it was meant for. So.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Carolyn, followed by Samantha, then Ellis on the Airbnb question.
Yeah, I absolutely don't support deregulating Airbnb, and this is an issue we've worked on quite a bit at the Rent Control Board. I'm proud that Santa Monica had one of the first and strongest bans on short-term rentals, and we went to court to uphold that ban, which it was. And despite the fact that we have a really strong ordinance, we had an issue with corporate rentals. And so then we worked with council to ban corporate rentals in this city and offer rentals for a 1-year lease term. However, due to the decimation of our staff in the city, we are unable to enforce any of this. And so what has been happening is that we do have a lot of illegal short-term rentals in the city. And so I think we need to get back to a situation where we're fully staffed, where we're working with the rent control agency and we're working together to make sure that we are keeping our units affordable and available at the maximum allowable rent as per our rent control charter to ensure that folks who actually are going to contribute to our community can stay here. And like my colleague said, we have hotels for people who want to pay transit occupancy tax and go to a good union quality job creator for a hotel. Thanks.
Okay. Ellis, your response. No, I'm sorry. I already randomized. Who's next? Wait,
You
I
had
need to go
said
back.
Samantha before.
I think Samantha's next, but I'm happy to go if you'd like.
Sorry, go ahead, Samantha.
I do not agree in deregulating Airbnbs, especially because it would give those that have the access and opportunity to do so the benefit. It benefits them more than our whole community and those that are less fortunate. At the same time, though, you know, we're voting on the transient occupancy tax. So, you know, it provides a lot more services and funding for other programs, not for all citywide priorities, but we need it. So thank you.
Okay, great. And Ellis, with you.
Yeah, we absolutely need very strict regulations of Airbnbs and other short-term rentals. You know, we're living in a time where folks are getting priced out of Santa Monica left and right. I saw a comment in the chat mentioning that folks who graduate from high school here very rarely have an opportunity to come back and find housing in Santa Monica. Same with folks who graduate from Santa Monica College. I mean, this is part of a much broader systematic issue, but we need to make sure that housing opportunities are made available for folks who are getting pushed out of their homes in Santa Monica by rising rents and unaffordability. You know, I'm a renter here in the Pico neighborhood where folks are paying as much as 60 to 70% of their income towards rent. This is a completely untenable and unsustainable situation. And if we're using our scarce housing stock for Airbnbs and other short-term rentals, it's going to completely destabilize our community. We need strict regulation.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that did not get to answer this question? I jumped the gun on the randomizer. Okay, final question on homelessness and housing. Here we go. Earlier this summer, Councilmember Negretti proposed a charter amendment which would have restructured our current system of rent control. She later pulled this proposal after significant community pushback led by members of this club. At the following meeting, council did end up committing the city to re-examine and potentially restructure rent control in 2023. What are your thoughts on this effort, and what stances do you expect to take during that discussion? And we're going to start this questions and 1-minute answers with Armen.
I think it's disingenuous to say that Councilmember Negretti was trying to change rent control. The rent control item you're talking about was passed by SMER actually back in 2012. So it had to do with the rent increases in terms of during inflationary times and the caps of it. I'm in a rent controlled unit. I'm a renter. I've been in the same unit for 12 years. My rents have gone up very, very minorly throughout these 12 years, $20 a month, a year, something to that effect. So the change was to allow the bottom 50% of at below the median to have a 0% increase in the inflationary times. So it wasn't a change of the rent control laws. What it was to give a 0% cap, a 0% rent increase to the bottom 50% of renters. So I supported that measure. I think the cap at $140 for the higher end measure was not a huge increase.
Please wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, next is Samantha, followed by Troy, followed by Jesse.
I actually didn't.
So I'm going to be leaving to go.
And someone needs to mute themselves.
It's all good. I'll start your time over again, Sam.
I didn't agree with it, but at the same time, I think we do need to revise the ordinance if it hasn't been looked over for the past, I think, like 4+ years. And I think, you know, city council now needs to go to rent control board and say, hey, you know, like, this is your chance to actually make a difference and do something and make changes to it after so long. If you think it's good, then we can leave it as it is. But if you think there could be changes to it that could better protection for our tenants and rent control, then even better. So yeah, and that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. Troy, followed by Jesse.
I think Councilmember Negretti's intentions were good, but I think that the approach was flawed. The idea was to have rents under a certain level have less of the percent of the rent increase. But the problem is that half the people paying the lowest rents are making the most money, and because they pay such low rents. So I would like to see some sort of means-based approach. And I know there's some legality to the ability of that, but I have a friend who's a teacher who lives in Santa Monica who nearly can't afford to stay here, but she has to be in her workplace. We need to protect people that are typically low income earners that have to be in their place of where they work and help them stay in Santa Monica. So wherever that's possible through vouchers or through a process that includes changing the charter, we need to protect these people and not the people that are living in low rent and making lots and lots of money.
Okay, thank you. Next is Jesse, followed by Ellis.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Troy, one part of Troy's answer I agree with, which is that the way in which it was attempting to segregate certain people paying more than less was actually not in any way related to the income that they make, but instead the length of their tenure in an apartment in Santa Monica. And I don't think that's a way to determine who gets to pay rent increases and who doesn't. And but I would take issue with the second part of Troy's answer, which is just that rent control is not traditionally designed as a means to help low-income people. It's designed as a means to create stability and security for all renters in a community so that they can all plan effectively and not be displaced from their homes and be able to continue to live near their work or send their kids to the same school and be entitled to the same stability that homeowners and those who are lucky enough to afford a 30-year mortgage enjoy. So I think we should keep it the same. And I support the changes that were proposed by Carolyn and the rest of the rent board to lower the cap to deal with our historic inflation.
Okay, thank you. Troy, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to respond at all.
Yes, I understand the stability argument, and we have overstability sometimes with rent control apartments being passed down 3 generations. But I do believe that we still need to help out despite the purpose of rent control, the people that are rent burdened, that are struggling. And we want to help out the people that serve our children, serve us food, and serve our guests when they stay in our hotels. So that's why I would support finding a way to serve the people in whatever way possible that we need, which are low-income earners that are struggling to pay rent.
Okay, we're going to go to Ellis, then Natalya, then to Carolyn, but I want to reread it.
Can I respond real quick in response to Troy's? Because he's talking about me in terms of living in a building for 3 generations. Can I respond to that?
If you certainly feel attacked, you have 30 seconds.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I live in a rent controlled unit that my family has a lease to. That's nothing wrong with it. I work minimum wage, don't make a dime. Without rent control, I would not be able to afford living in Santa Monica, even with my significant other. Like, and if that offends you because I can't afford living in Santa Monica and don't make a dime, like, I think that's your problem and not mine.
Okay, well, we do need to move on. And it's time to get to Ellis and Natalya and Carolyn. I just want to reread again, at the following meeting, council did end up committing the city to re-examine and potentially restructure rent control in 2023. What are your thoughts on this effort and what stances do you expect to take during that discussion, Ellis?
Well, I'll tell you, Ted, I was one of 6 people in the audience at 4 a.m. when this was all being discussed. And I'll just say as a basic matter, no good government happens at 4 a.m. You know, it's important to understand the context by which this all came about. You know, the rent board came to the city council with some very well thought proposals for making sure that our rent control was appropriately implemented in light of the changes that have been going on in the COVID pandemic. And this proposal came about after those very reasonable rent control board measures were put before the council. And I had been fighting to make sure that our rent control laws are implemented fairly and to protect all renters. And what gets lost in this conversation often is that those folks who have the highest rents in Santa Monica are often those who have the highest rent burdens and who have the least disposable income left after they pay their rent. And had that proposal gone forward, there's a very real risk that the inequitable application of it would have rendered the entire rent control law unconstitutional.
Okay, thank you. Natalya, your thoughts?
So I thought that the intentions may have been well-intentioned, but the actual execution of bringing the policy forward and the substance of the policy was significantly flawed. We have a duly elected rent control board, and they are the subject matter experts, and they had spent a very long time crafting what were the appropriate changes to the laws that we have to propose. And, I believe that we should listen to them. And I know that there was a disagreement between the city attorney and the rent control board's general counsel. The rent control board's general counsel, this is her bread and butter. Rent control law, rent control law, rent control law. I said that 3 times fast. So theater kid. We should listen to her. I will be supporting Measure RC and Measure EM in the November election, and I hope everyone will join me as well, because we need to protect rent control. It's what makes Santa Monica the amazing place it is. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, Carolyn on this question.
Well, I have a lot of feelings about this being on the rent control board, but I will just say that rent control is not affordable housing. We mentioned that earlier. Rent control is community stability. Many of us here are renters. Just because you are a renter does not mean you are entitled to less protections than a homeowner. I don't think that we should have 2 classes of people. And just like when you're a homeowner and you have a mortgage, you expect what your expenses are going to be every year. You're a renter under rent control, you expect what your expenses are going to be every year. Never would we have anticipated that we would trigger the cap with the astronomical inflation that we have. And as soon as that was calculated, we said we need to do something. Rent control is not for poor people, quote unquote. I'm tired of us in this country criminalizing poverty. and saying that you are less worthy or you don't know how to make decisions, and we're going to tell you how to make those decisions or what you should spend your money on. Rent control allows you to plan, it allows you to save, and it's what makes us great. in
Please wrap
Santa
up.
Monica. And I will certainly be supporting RC, and I was absolutely not in support of the unconstitutional solution. that
Please
was
wrap up,
at 2 in
Carolyn.
the morning. Thank you.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on to a diversity, equity, and inclusion question before some public safety questions, and finally a sustainability question. The diversity, equity, and inclusion question I'm about to ask will first be answered by Samantha, followed by Natalya, followed by Armen. And the question is thus: can you please name some concrete policies you would explore to promote equity on staff and in our community for the following traditionally underrepresented populations: women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, Latinx, Native American, and LGBTQ+. Samantha.
I wouldn't know a specific policy, but I would definitely love to create a policy in terms of this. And I think the first approach would be housing. You know, we always talk about inclusivity and diversity, but to actually achieve that, it all starts with hiring people. You know, we hire more people who are of color, who are underrepresented, who are LGBTQIA plus, and who have the experience, the knowledge, the capability, and the work to do so. And thank you.
Thank you. Natalya? Specific policies, concrete policies?
So for all of it's a lot to answer in 1 minute. So I will try to keep it at a relatively high level. But one of the things that I think we can do that would help all of the populations you mentioned is to expand our parental leave policy for city staff. Mayor Pro Tem McCowan brought forth a proposal when we realized that, hey, why doesn't our city staff have paid parental leave? And now we've worked it into the budget to get 6 weeks. I don't think that's enough. I think that we need to expand it and make it at least 8 to 12 weeks, because if we are a progressive city, and if we are purporting to be a progressive city, then we need to reflect that in our hiring practices. We also have an equity plan that's in the works, that's been in the works, that is looking at how do we improve the pipeline of underrepresented folks in city government, in city staff, et cetera. So I would listen to what the equity officers come up with and try to implement those policies.
Okay, thank you. Armen.
First thing we need to do is ensure that we have an annual diversity report to assess hiring, firing, retention, and promotion practices for our city. That needs to happen at a public hearing. It needs to be open and transparent, and it needs to be discussed. And I think putting it up in the forefront and having real tracking results is the only way that we're going to achieve our diversity and inclusion guidelines. So that would be the policy push that I would make.
Okay, thank you very much. Ellis, followed by Troy.
Well, I want to echo two really important points that Samantha made. But first, I think it's important for all of us to recognize that our city is built upon a long history of racism and institutionalized discrimination against folks from the Black community, folks from the Latino community, and that racist history still is being felt today. But to those two important points that Samantha made, I mean, representation absolutely matters. We need to make sure that we're making concerted efforts to actually go out and recruit and hire folks from traditionally disadvantaged communities. And it's especially true for leadership positions. And it's especially true on our city's boards and commissions, I'll just say. But then the other issue too is the housing piece of this, especially here in the Pico neighborhood. Longstanding Black and Latino families are getting pushed out because they simply can't afford to continue to live here. And we don't have housing opportunities for folks who graduate from high school to come back and live here. So we can't really expect folks who, are from these communities who want to work here to be able to join our workforce if they don't have an opportunity to actually be part of the community.
Okay, thank you, Ellis. Troy, your response on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a strong advocate for DEI, and my experience is having affinity groups when you have the ability to have a BIPOC affinity group, a LGBT affinity group, there's a certain sense of belonging that comes with that, and ideas can be shared. And my company has where you can focus on 3 separate areas. One, which is ways to grow the business. Another, which is ways to teach our own selves, one another that work for the company. And the third is to help out the community through philanthropy efforts. So that's what I would implement. I would also instruct mentoring to have people diverse, cross over different sorts of mentorees and mentors that can have the ability to get people ready to be promoted. I would like to, and stay with the company. I would like to see audits and bias trainings to be sure how many people of different backgrounds are being promoted, and ensure that there's a diverse set of leaders that are in positions to promote, so that we can make sure that people get the representation that they need.
Okay, great. Jesse?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of great policies put forward. Natalya, in terms of expanding staff parental leave, Troy, in terms of the mentorships that are available, and of course, just pursuing basic DEI best practices when it comes to hiring. But I want to go back to what Ellis said a little bit about housing. 90% of the people that work in our community and serve it currently cannot afford to live here. And where you live determines everything from the quality of the air you breathe, the schools you're able to attend, your chance of graduating from college, and even how much money you'll make over your lifetime. We have a lot of signs in our community that say Black Lives Matter, but if we are not actively creating more opportunities for low-income people of color to live in our community and take advantage of its resources by legalizing middle-income housing and by funding more affordable housing, we are not going to be able to improve this problem just with sort of DEI catchphrases. We need to actually allow people to live in and take advantage of our high resource communities.
Perfectly timed. Thank you, Jesse. Finally, on this question, Carolyn.
Yeah, I think we need to recognize that all of our government systems are built on white supremacy, and that we've built historically inequitable ways of serving people in our community and throughout this country. And so wanting to acknowledge the great work that our council has done around our right to return program. Jesse mentioned more housing for folks in our community, making sure that the people who have been displaced and harmed by what Ellis mentioned are, quite frankly, systemically racist city hall that displaced our Black community, making sure that there are opportunities for folks to return and to benefit first and foremost, very important. Secondly, we are a jobs creator as a city government, and we control the power of the market as a city government. We employ people in good union, family sustaining wage, career pathway jobs. How are we looking to make sure that we get our hard to hire or our hardly hired into a pipeline for city jobs? We've done this very successfully at the county. We've taken folks with lived experience of homelessness, incarceration, et cetera, from groups that are underrepresented and put them on a pipeline fast track into civil service. And I think we need to be looking at how we put our money where our mouth is as a city government.
Thank you, Carolyn. We're moving on to public safety now. And the question, the first 3 people to answer the following question will be Jesse, followed by Troy, followed by Natalya. Do you support efforts to promote investment of general fund monies previously allocated toward armed police response to instead be put toward mental health services and other unarmed departments when appropriate? Jesse.
Yeah, when appropriate. I honestly believe there's no silver bullet in solving crime, and anyone who tells you the answer is entirely more police funding or defunding is on an ideological trip and not a real problem solver. The truth is we may need more police officers, but we also definitely need more mental health services, more social services, more housing, more youth jobs, more universal basic income. All of these things have been shown to reduce crime, and we need to be taking a balanced approach to what best meet our community's needs, and not calling mindlessly for one thing because it's what suits our given ideology. I'm a problem solver, not an ideologue, and I'll do what it takes to solve this issue by employing a broad range of strategies.
Okay, thank you very much. Troy.
We need both. We need armed police and we need unarmed social workers that are working as a public service officer. Only 3% of psychologists work in the field. And that is exactly the group that can help out our underserved communities, specifically homeless, people dealing with mental health issues, and people with drug addiction. So if we're able to have more of those people and attracting them with what it takes, which is more salary, then we're able to help out a greater percent of our community. Not everybody in the police needs to be armed, yet we do need armed police because their presence is exactly what's going to stop crime. And that is very high in this community as well. But it's all intertwined because crime, homelessness, they don't make each other have to be together, but they often coincide. And I would add mental illness along with that. So if we're able to have professionals that can decide what the particular issue is and
Please
treat
wrap
it,
up.
that's what exactly we need.
Thank you very much. Natalya, followed by Carolyn, followed by Ellis on this question.
I believe there's a balance. So when we actually look at our city's public safety budget, there's a lot that goes into it that we don't actually think of when we think of police budgets. There's a youth diversion program. There's the HELP team, which is the homeless liaison program, which provides trauma-informed care and brings help to folks who are experiencing homelessness and brings police together with other services providers. We've also got the CRU unit through the fire department, and we have other mental health and homelessness street teams that are going out there. So we need to take a close look at how the time and money is being allocated so that we can realign it to be more in line with our values if we believe it's not. I do believe we need more street teams and we need more wraparound services. As Carolyn mentioned earlier, we absolutely need more mental health beds. That's a really big part of it that we need.
Please wrap up. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say that's a big part of what we need. So if we can find funding for that, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Carolyn, you're up next, followed by Ellis.
Yeah, I mean, I think this question is overly general. However, my understanding in discussions with the police department is that we actually have critical vacancies within the police department, right? So before we talk about shifting funding, I think we need to see that we have a fully staffed police department and see how that's working. But I've said it in my questionnaire, I'll say it again. I believe that we need to draw down at least 25% increase in our mental health dollars. I think it's possible. I think that we need to pair mental health services with our first responders. And I think that it's not just about sworn officers. That's like Natalya mentioned about civilian assistance. From my understanding, we only have one police activities league officer. We only have 2 cultural services officers. These have been cut during the pandemic. We know that we could be more effective if we had more community services officers, et cetera. And so I think that I'm
Please
not
wrap it up.
to increase our carceral system. I think that we need to increase our social work, our outreach, our context sensitive services and our supportive services. But at the same time, I
Please
think
wrap up.
to help our city run more effectively, and that means resourcing our
Carolyn.
police department. Thanks.
Jesus. Okay. I love her. I do. Ellis, your answer.
Yeah, we absolutely need to reinvest in mental health services and a broad range of social services. And I think it's important to recognize, though, that there needs to be an important partnership between the people providing those key services and our first responders, both in police and fire. I mean, I mentioned it before, but by most estimates, as many as 75% of the folks who are experiencing homelessness in Santa Monica are experiencing mental health or drug addiction issues. And by one estimate, it's as high as 90%. We don't have the social services and supportive services that are there right now. And I'll be honest, this is an issue that hits close to home for me. My dad works as a methadone doctor in San Francisco. They've had their own struggles and challenges for a long time, but this is largely an issue of making sure that we have folks on the ground who are trained mental health professionals to offer targeted interventions. And there are strategies that have proven to work in other cities, but it really is a matter of making sure that we recruit mental health professionals and get them on the ground working together with our first responders. And it's also a regional issue too. You know, something Caroline had mentioned earlier, making sure that we partner with with other folks in other jurisdictions to make sure that we address this regional issue.
Okay. All right. Let's keep it tight out there, guys. Samantha and finally Armen on this question.
So I believe that our first responders are already adequately funded. And like the reality is police officers don't stop crime. You know, we might be able to prevent it, but they don't stop crime. And so with that, you know, homelessness cannot be solved by criminalizing it and bringing officers to the scene. I mean, I think that like demoralizes the whole point. And like as many others have said, you know, it is about getting our professionals to work with first responders to get these individuals the help they need, and supporting policies, programs, and services that support our most vulnerable and those that are at risk of facing homelessness or are already homeless, or you know, experiencing drug issues, mental health issues, and a wide variety of other wants and needs. Thank you.
Perfectly timed. Armen, your response.
Thanks, Todd. If I understand the question correctly, the question was, would you move money from law enforcement?
Do you want me to reread it?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. Do you support efforts to promote investment of general fund monies previously allocated toward armed police response to instead be put toward mental health services and other unarmed departments when appropriate?
No. So that sounds like a defund the police question, and absolutely not. I think it's two separate issues. I think that, you know, we need to have adequate funding for the police department, and then we need to find separate funding to deal with the homeless issues and the mental health issues in our city. I could tell you that last year, you know, as a city, we put $18,500 of cash money into the homeless services for every single individual homeless person on the streets of Santa Monica. And we've got virtually zero results. What we're doing is we're throwing money at a problem and we're getting zero results. We need to step back and say, what are we doing? We're spending another $35,000 per homeless individual on emergency services, dealing with the issues. We need to step back and say, what are we doing? We can't just throw more money at the problem. In San Francisco, they throw $100,000 per homeless individual at the problem in the private industry with zero results. What we need to do is we need to step back. I don't have the answers.
Please wrap up.
Nobody else on this panel has the answers, but we know that all of the money we're spending with the professionals, and they're providing zero answers. We need to track results, audit, and we need them to
Please wrap up, Armen.
that are compassionate, that keep people off the streets and ends our problems. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on. And this is a short answer question, and I'm not going to even, John's not even going to start a clock. It's going to be yes or no, and I'll read it out, but it's going to be yes or no. This morning, we saw an escalation of the growing conflict between the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and a Los Angeles County Supervisor of Santa Monica's own Sheila Kuehl, who strongly supports civilian oversight of the Sheriff's Department. Some candidates here support the sheriff, others do not. With a simple yes or no answer, no added comment, do you support Sheriff Villanueva's re-election? Ellis.
No, I do not support re-election.
Natalya.
No.
Carolyn.
Absolutely not.
Troy.
No.
Samantha.
No.
Armen.
The lone wolf, yes.
And finally, Jesse.
No.
Okay, thank you all for being brief. The last question on public safety. Do you support civilian oversight of the Santa Monica Police Department? If so, would you like to see anything anything done differently than our current oversight structure? If not, why not? And we'll start this one. Let me hit the randomizer with Jesse.
I think every community owes it to itself to go through a period of reflection and revise all of its policies around use of force and how we investigate those incidents. I know that Samantha and others on the Civilian Oversight Commission have been working on policies and reforms to reflect best practices of civilian oversight of police departments around the country. And I think that there's been a series of appointments made in the last year that have undermined some of that effort. And I think we should certainly pursue it and continue to make sure that our department, while better than many around the country, is upholding the highest standards of accountability and transparency. And I would support measures to make sure it is living up to that standard.
Thank you very much. Samantha, followed by Natalya, followed by Troy.
I would definitely give more independency to the committee itself, especially after we were barred from a wide variety of activities and things that we were literally appointed to do. And I think also going back into reviewing all of the OIR report recommendations to ensure that our police department is credible, transparent, accountable, especially because we learned that they cannot be trusted with their own investigations, with their own policies and practices. And I think we also need to start championing for the police department to create, oh my God, what's the word? A Brady list, because everything is all documented. They have nothing on electronic form. And if we really want them to be transparent, it's ensuring that we have a Brady list of all those officers that have used excessive force or any other malpractice in the police department.
Okay, thank you. Troy? No, I'm sorry. Natalya, followed by Troy.
So I absolutely support oversight and transparency and accountability of all police departments, not just ours. I believe that civilian oversight is key to rebuilding trust among our public safety officers and our communities. It's important to have a forum where community members can be heard and where folks know that we're really going to do something about it if they've experienced any sort of mistreatment. I know that in Santa Monica, we have been fighting for a police oversight commission for 20 years, I believe, something like that. The Santa Monica Coalition for Police Reform has been trying to get an independent oversight commission into action, into play for a while. And I'm really glad we have one now, and we need to utilize them wisely.
Thank you, Natalya. Troy, then Ellis.
Accountability is simply doing what you say. And there should be no problem with anybody being held accountable, including our police. In September 2020, there was a accountability body of people, the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, that was put in place. And I believe that it should stay in place. But the reason that it was put in place was because of the civil unrest. And I believe that Santa Monica needs to do its part and truthfully say that it has in investing in the underserved communities that were affected through eminent domain in the 1950s and 60s. If it's able to make an effort and reach out, build housing, and help out the communities and provide services, then we are able to say that Santa Monica is doing its part to make the world a better place. And as a result, we will have a happy, coalescing family of people in the community together.
Thank you. Ellis?
Yeah, I've said before tonight that Santa Monica today is a living embodiment of a racist past, and that's not ever more true than in policing. I've heard personal stories from folks who have been here for many decades, hearing about our police department used to recruit white cops from the Deep South to come in here in Santa Monica, and the history of the police department targeting Black and Latino folks in the Pico neighborhood specifically. It's especially important when we talk about police oversight to really recognize our racist past here in Santa Monica and how that informs policing today. And it's especially important for any police oversight board or body to have membership that's led by those who come from communities that have historically been targeted and oppressed by racist policing in Santa Monica. And it doesn't make sense, and in fact is counterproductive for oversight to be led by people within those racist institutions. We need to empower Black and Latino voices in the Pico neighborhood especially to lead the discussion in reimagining policing.
Okay, Armen, same question to you.
I'm in favor of an oversight committee. I'm in favor of transparency. I'm in favor of everybody being held accountable to doing the job that they are given, that they, that they're paid to do in a constitutional manner. I think we owe a lot of gratitude to the police department in the city of Santa Monica. We have a very diverse program. We have a very constitutional police staff. We don't have the problems that have happened across the country. So I applaud our men in blue. They do a fantastic job, and what we should be doing is we should be applauding them. We should create programs to export the kind of policing that we do here in Santa Monica to across the nation. That's the solution. The solution is to do what we are doing in Santa Monica. I'm proud of it. And so transparency is always part of that. An oversight committee is always part of that, and to keep everybody real and honest and moving forward in a great positive manner so that residents can enjoy the fruits of our city.
Okay, Carolyn, you're the last word on civilian oversight of the police department.
Yeah, so I think any city department needs oversight, period, and that we shouldn't be afraid of that type of oversight and transparency. And I think that the events of May 31st, 2020 obviously had a big impact on what has transpired since then. But what I would like to see changed about the Public Safety Reform Oversight Commission, which was, I think, your initial question, is that it needs to be a little bit less politicized. It's become a polarizing, group of appointees who are doing bidding. And I think that we need to be a little bit more neutral. We need to staff it appropriately, and we need to make sure that we give folks the opportunity to address council directly, because if I'm not mistaken, there aren't very many people on their meetings. And if there are real solutions coming forward that involve budget, policy change, council, and our police officer buy-in, those presentations need to be made public. I think that our police department shouldn't necessarily be lumped in with the national movement on policing, but I do think that any police department that wants
Please wrap it up, Carolyn.
seriously, incredibly needs to have an oversight mechanism.
Thank you. Okay, we have had a rule change. We're going to go to one more 1-minute question on sustainability, but our closing arguments due to the time crunch are now going to be 30 seconds. So prepare your minds for that 30-second elevator pitch rather than a 1 minute. And our sustainability question will begin with Jesse, followed by Troy, followed by Carolyn. And that question is this: Santa Monica has long been a leader in sustainability. As a council member, what are the actions you will take to ensure Santa Monica maintains its leadership on fighting climate change? Jesse?
Well, you're right. Santa Monica has been a real leader in this. We were at the beginning of the environmental movement, and we hold it really close to our hearts. And I think we've shown that through our participation in the Clean Power Alliance, getting our residences running on mainly renewable sources of energy. But, and I hate to beat the drum consistently on housing, but if we continue on as a community where 90% of people who work here are commuting from 1, 2, or even 3 or 4 hours away, we're not going to meet our climate goals as a community. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in our state, and it's the only sector that's growing instead of shrinking when it comes to looking at the different sectors of emissions in our economy. Until we create 15-minute cities where people are able to meet their basic needs, go to their jobs, go to the store, take their kids to school without getting into a vehicle, we are not going to meet our climate needs. And that's where I would focus us.
Okay, great. Thank you. Troy.
Yes, sustainability for me is very important, and it's historically been very important for Santa Monica. And I believe in save the people, save the planet. So if we're already leading the way in sustainability, how about we invest into the sustainability of our people? The people need help, and we are part of the environment too. So let's say, hey, we have reached a good level on sustainability of our buildings, of our transit. Let's help out our people and ensure they get the food that they need and the mental health that they need and sleeping, and making sure that they can get the access to information that they need to live their most prosperous life. And so helping out, including the Pico area, there are levels of pollution and heat in the Pico area that need to be worked on and should be investigated so that it's no worse than any other area, because we know that black and brown communities are living there and they need help. So that's what I would do.
All right, thank you, Troy. Carolyn, followed by Samantha.
Can you repeat the question, Todd?
Happy to. Santa Monica has long been a leader in sustainability. As a council member, what are the actions you will take to ensure Santa Monica maintains its leadership on fighting climate change?
Yeah. So I'm really proud. Obviously, Jesse mentioned it, the Clean Power Alliance. We were really at the forefront in joining that, and now we have electrified a lot of the power that we're receiving. I also think that we should move from an electric preferred to an electric required building code. Finally, I think we don't have enough, not even finally, additionally, I don't think we have enough protected bike lanes, and therefore we don't have as many people out on their bike and out of private cars as we could. We need to disincentivize private car use, period. Whether it's electric vehicles or gas vehicles, they all release particulate matter. We need to encourage multimodal transportation. And I think that Santa Monica is a very walkable, bikeable city. We need to really commit to our Vision Zero safety plan to make sure that all folks are safe, especially our children, as they're walking to and from school. We can also increase the amount of diagonal crosswalks that we have as another mechanism to improve pedestrian safety. And then finally, I don't think it's too bold to say capping the 10 freeway. That is something that I've said multiple times, and there's bipartisan infrastructure law money for that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Samantha, followed by Natalya.
So a specific policy I would bring to promote our sustainable city is is AB 551, which I have been a pillar for. It aims to incentivize urban agriculture, and through a comprehensive set of goals and policies, our city could purchase vacant lots via various funds and grants and give the land back into the hands of the community. Adopting policies like AB 551 creates pathways to accelerate a vibrant economy, increase our resiliency, and support Santa Monica's vision for a livable and sustainable community for generations to come. This program will strengthen existing policies such as the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, the Sustainable City Plan, the Recycling Ordinance, and Vision Zero. More importantly, I will continue to advocate and organize with the community to get City Council to approve the Zero Emissions Building and EV Reach Code, which will prohibit fuel gas infrastructure in new buildings with limited exemptions. To emphasize, the Energy Reach Code would support the city's goal for buildings to be zero net carbon emissions.
Please wrap up, Samantha.
And reduce greenhouse gas emissions to achieve 80% reduction in community carbon emissions by 2030. Thank you.
Okay, Natalya, followed by Armen.
At a high level, Santa Monica has absolutely been a leader of sustainability, and a lot of the policies that we have put into place here have been used as models for other cities. So we need to continue doing that, and we need to expand on that work. Some of the other folks here have mentioned housing. It is super important because it intersects with everything else. Housing will help us address our environmental racism, which is something else that other folks have mentioned. We've got places that are, I know the last couple of weeks, we've all been experiencing the heat. Usually Santa Monica is not this hot, but this is where we're at. We've got to figure out how we can provide funding to retrofit buildings to make it more, make them more sustainable. We are very lucky in that we were forward thinking with our water usage. We are one of the few cities that actually owns groundwater wells, and we have a recycling facility that helps.
Please start to wrap up.
Thank you. Housing, transportation, water, electricity, very important to sustainability. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for bottom lining it for us, Natalya. Armen, followed by Ellis on this.
So as a civil and environmental engineer, the environment is super critical for me. I make my living in environmental issues. You know, I design a lot of rain harvesting cisterns, the biggest one being over 2 million gallons at a single use facility. But in Santa Monica, I think we've done a lot. I think that we need to get back to basics though right now. I think that our priorities right now, we're not going to solve the environmental problems. We're not going to solve global warming. But what we do need to do is we need to solve the crime in our streets, the homelessness on our streets, the dirt on our streets, the economic recovery. We need to have a city that is viable financially, that works for its residents. We talk a big game a lot of times about environmental sustainability and whatnot, but we don't have a mode of transportation for residents to use and enjoy that's cheap, that's efficient, that gets us out of our car and locally in town. I'm not talking about the rail lines that bring other people to Santa Monica, but locally in town. I support a
Please wrap up.
system that would go in all of the neighborhoods and be able to take the residents to our downtown, back and forth to all the business areas, Main Street, downtown, whatnot.
Oh, okay, thank you, Armen. Ellis, finally to you on climate change.
Yeah, I mean, to make sure that our city is viable, we need to make sure that we're prepared to address our climate future. And I'll tell you, as an environmental attorney, I've been a leading voice in making sure that our city continues its sustainability initiatives for the future. And a large part of that is making sure that we get people off the street and we make sure that our streets are safe for folks on bicycles, on micromobility, and pedestrians. It's completely unacceptable that so many people in our city are injured and killed each year by traffic accidents. So we've got to completely reimagine our streetscape. We've got to make this a safe city in that respect. We've got to completely reimagine water self-sufficiency, getting people off the road. I was leading the charge with other planning commissioners to make sure that we maximize opportunities for transit-oriented development, especially in proximity to the Expo line and other transit-rich corridors in Santa Monica. Again, getting people off the street will be key. So will water self-sufficiency, and that's going to be threatened by climate change as salinity levels encroach into our water table. We've also got to make sure that our urban forest canopy is preserved. As much as 20% of it is near the end of its lifespan. So I've been a leader on sustainability, and I'll continue to lead our city in the future in this.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We're now going into closing arguments. Now, again, just as a reminder, and not with any particular candidate in mind, you only have 30 seconds, and I will be strict about cutting you off because the club needs to have a robust discussion on local measures. And we're going to begin closing arguments first with Jesse Zwick.
Okay, 30 seconds. I grew up in this community. I'm now raising a son of my own here. I think it is still a wonderful place to do that, but it is certainly a lot less affordable than when I was growing up. And that is driving homelessness and traffic and so many of the problems we're all concerned about tonight. I'm running because I have a son and I know he'll need housing he can afford in a climate that's livable, and because everyone deserves that. I'm endorsed by Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights and Santa Monica Forward, Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, Mayor Sue Himmelrich, Councilmember Gleam Davis, and my former bosses, Nithya Raman and Mike Bonin. I look forward to earning your support as well.
Thank you, Jesse. Next up is Armen, followed by Ellis.
Armen Melkonians, my why is my 4-year-old, my wife, and the problems we're having in our city. I want my 4-year-old to be able to live in the city, but I also want him to have a father that's alive, it's safe to walk in our streets. I don't want my mother-in-law to be attacked when she walks out in the streets. I don't want my car to be stolen from outside of my apartment. I want to bring balance back to Santa Monica. The city fire department and the police department have endorsed my candidacy as a public safety candidate. I will work from hour one of day one to make sure that this city is safe and clean for us once again.
Thank you, Armen.
Thank
you. Next up, Ellis, followed by Samantha.
Yeah, now more than ever, it's really important to have folks in city government who respect good governance, who are people of integrity, and people who are knowledgeable first and foremost. I bring all of those qualities here. My experience in the Planning Commission and my experience as an environmental attorney will really position me to allow us to lead our city into the future. And first and foremost, we also need people who have stood on the front lines to fight for renters' rights, to fight for our workers, to fight for justice, equality, and progressive values. And I will continue to do that on the city council.
Perfectly timed. Thank you. Samantha, followed by Troy. Closing argument.
Growing up, being raised in Santa Monica, born and raised here, I know I'm one of the most viable candidates for this race because I'm the youngest, most passionate and vibrant voices for the community. As the youngest, I represent the desire to create change and bring new and different perspectives. My passion gives me the drive and motivation to adjust the conditions within our lives, families, and communities. And moreover, the vibrancy I generate will ensure the community voice is listened to and spoken for in every policy and program that is brought to the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Samantha. Troy Harris, your closing argument followed by Carolyn Torosis.
My name is Troy Harris, and I love Santa Monica so much. What drew me here was the peer concerts and hanging out with my friends, and I miss those days. And I know it's got to bring it back, and that's the economic recovery. And being that I'm an expert in logistics and supply chain, I know that business restraints are what's going to control the businesses to do what they got to do to bring the city back. I'm just the guy for the job. I have the energy and I have experience in working with local government on the oversight committee for clean beaches, but I also bring a whole lot of outside experience in just working from the heart and wanting to do the right thing for you.
Very good. Thank you. Carolyn Torosis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carolyn Torosis. My husband, Dan, and I moved to Santa Monica because we believe that this city reflects our values of inclusion, of economic diversity, of being able to protect our workers and having our workers live where they work, of a clean environment and excellent schools. And I'm running for city council because I believe that our government fundamentally should stand in that gap and be effective and provide those services to our citizens. I'm an executive and attorney in local government. I've worked across all levels of government, local, federal, and state. I have extensive experience navigating multiple complex bureaucracies.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I want to ensure that there's a no wrong door approach in Santa Monica, and I would be glad for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Our final closing argument tonight, Natalya Zernitskaya. Final word to you.
Thank you. I know how easy it is to throw out catchphrases, but I have the track record to get beyond the talk. I'm a former 4-year president of the League of Women Voters of Santa Monica, an advisory board member of Climate Action Santa Monica, a board member of the Human Relations Council of Santa Monica Bay Area, and a former appointee to the city's audit subcommittee. My endorsers, like the LA County Democratic Party, Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, Mayor Pro Tem Kristen McCowan, Councilmember Gleam Davis, and many more believe in me. And I hope that after learning about me, that you'll believe in me too. Check out my website, natalyaforcitycouncil.com.
Thank you very much. And thank everybody for a terrific panel. I'm Todd Flora, publisher of West Side Voice. I hope you'll go to westsidevoicela.com on a regular basis throughout campaign season and quite frankly, for the rest of your lives. And I want to thank John and the board of the club for inviting me to be a part of this terrific night. Back to you, John.
Thanks so much, Todd. Did a great job moderating this evening. And I also want to give a real round of applause to all of our candidates. I'll go to the gallery view so we can see everybody. But I mean, I'm really impressed. Everybody who came here expressing a wide variety of different views, some that maybe would be popular in this room, some that would not be. And you all did such a great job presenting your vision for Santa Monica, and we really appreciate everybody. So we'll be looking forward to making our recommendations in the city council race and the other races that we had last week, next week, and then the week after that on September 28th, we'll be voting to endorse in all of these races and in the ballot measures. So we are looking forward to that.